is is the data center, I guess you could say universe, is that where the next trend is based on what you've seen, what you've heard, the news that's coming out, and the kind of money that somebody can make in here is just astronomical. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think one thing for people to think about is that society, especially technological changes, move in cycles, right? That you can graph them, you can chart them, they're repeatable, right? And so when people bring up this idea that, this crypto thing's just a fad, I say, then why does it have twice the adoption rate of the internet or cell phones, right? Like, I still remember when people were talking about those things as being fads. And, I would ask you this too, like, think of all the companies that really bought into the hardcore infrastructure side of things like the internet and things like cell phones. Like, how well did they do, right? The idea that you're going to provide these high level graphic cards like Nvidia did, right? Because they saw where it was going, right? And you saw some early adopters of the internet dropped off, but the winners won huge. And you saw the same thing with cell phones. There used to be a lot more cell phone companies, but now the winners are massive, and they just keep investing in their infrastructure. And then I look at cloud, AI, crypto, these kinds of things. They've got these incredible, really steep adoption curves. That's where you want to be, right? And we are still in the fairly early. We are like, it's past the proven concept. We're right about here, that inflection point, right? If the average technology takes about 17 years to become mainstream consciousness, then we're about there with all of this stuff, the data, the AI. Like, AI, let me try and simplify it for people. It's not a mystery. It's basically taking like supercomputers with extreme processing power and then going to mine through data. And data is not a cloud up in the sky. Data is a warehouse full of extreme amounts of big boxes with big power consumption that are storing all this data. And an AI is just going through and combing through all the data that's stored on those boxes in obscene timeframes, and then trying to collate and bring something intelligent. It's basically pattern recognition of what they found throughout looking at that data. And so while AI has this massive effect on the world, it all stems from needing to have that hardware infrastructure in a warehouse somewhere. And we're at this critical junction point as we're going into inflection. Are we going to watch on the sidelines what AWS, Google, and all the big guys put $30 billion a year into infrastructure? Because they know where it's going. You all heard the term follow the smart money. I mean, that's big money. But now there are opportunities for you and I to participate in what we call decentralized clouds. And like, to me, we're fools if we're not getting in on it somehow, just to own my little slice of the infrastructure.
I mean, I mean, I've already told you this, that I literally live right up the street from a road where my church is on. That when we built the church 12 years ago or 15 years ago, something like that, it was a 3-mile stretch of cornfield. Like, literally, it was just old farmland outside of, it's actually outside of New Albany, Ohio. And now that entire road is loaded with data centers. Like, Google's there, Facebook there, Amazon's there. And today I was having this conversation with somebody who's got somebody that's getting units. They're basically figured out a way to, just like you and I have figured out, to buy units that are going to spin off cash for it. And this guy was talking about, there's a water plant being put, the big towers you see in like the old towns.
Yeah.
They're putting one up there, and I couldn't figure out why. And believe it or not, that is part of the cooling system that has to go through underground to do that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, they're literally building a city of data centers. And you and I both shared the same news clips already before of all the guys like Kevin Leary and the people on CNBC and Fox News and my local news, all talking about data centers being where they're putting their money in commercial real estate. They're converting their real estate into data centers, things like that, because it's so much. And you and I, we did figure out, we're not going to tell you exactly if you want details, because again, I want to keep these generic, and I we're not financial advisors or anything like that. You're welcome to reach out to Terry or myself. Terry, you and I found something with what we're doing that's just, it's just amazing. Where do you think of what we've figured out is where it's going?
Well, there's a bunch of things that I like about it. One is it doesn't have any of that complexity of crypto, right? The other thing I like is it's like you drive through any city, like if you're in Florida, you're going to drive by these huge, massive storage units like that are all over the place, right? The snowbirds have got to go rent their stuff, a place, and store their stuff because they come down for 6 months of the year. This is just like a digital landlord deal. It's a tenancy issue, right? And so the demand for data, think of how much data there is on the internet. Like the numbers are so big, you can't even put any context to it that matters. But I'll say this, there's been more data created in the last 2 years than all of basically history combined. What do you think is going to happen in the next two? That's why the big guys are spending 30 billion. And it turns out like it's lucrative as hell because businesses need it and there's nowhere to store it, and funding the hardware that builds out these data centers is very, very costly. So what are you going to do, right? Like you rent out these boxes. I jokingly say it, but I'm hashtag not really joking. I don't want to sound like financial advice, and yes, I'm generalizing. I'm definitely generalizing. But I told my buddy, like, the idea that you can plug a box in the wall and make 50 grand a year is obscene. Because then if you believe that premise, or you're willing to at least grow into that premise becoming reality, it then just becomes a question of like, well, how many boxes do you want? And then there are tiers of boxes, right? You can get these basic nodes, and then you can get these mid-sized ones and large ones and AI ones and stuff. And like my plan now is like I'm going to be like, you won't even see me on the map of like data center owners, but I will own that little infinitesimal small little piece of that hardware infrastructure along with guys like you. We're just going to do it as groups and just keep buying up our little slice of it. But it amounts to what?
That's what's great. I apologize for interrupting, but that's what's so cool about the project we've been really studying is it's literally it's exciting because of like with Bitcoin, it's hard to buy a 60,000. You know, everybody thinks when you buy a Bitcoin, I can't afford it because it's $60,000. Well, if you think about getting into data centers, I can't possibly think about it because it's billions of dollars, right? But when you said we have the ability to purchase units inside there, little centers themselves, little, you know, nodes is what I believe they do actually call them. It allows us fractional ownership of these centers.